One of the first questions I asked Susan was, there's one chapter that, I've just gone back to the piano after how many weeks of holiday, and then my fingers feel like sausages. And we say it all the time in English, but in Japan we don't. So that's one of the sentences that gave me this idea. I really want to translate this book. But I had to ask Susan, what kind of sausages did you mean?
You can hear much more from the two musicians involved a little later. We'll also ask, in the primary school classroom, does size matter? And which book would you pass on to the next generation? The Orange Prize has just published a service, and you also heard that from the Conservative MP Nadine Dorries. And I'm just looking at our emails coming in, already people reacting to that. You can, of course, continue to do so. It's Woman's Hour, and the address is bbc.co.uk/radio4/Woman's Hour. The concert pianist Noriko OGAWA was so taken by a book, Out of Silence, by her fellow pianist Susan Tomes, about performing in public, that she decided she had to translate it into her native Japanese. And happily, it was the start of a friendship. Noriko is in London preparing for a fundraising recital tomorrow to raise money for the victims of the earthquake and tsunami. Judy Herman was there as the two women duetted for the first time, playing the Berceuse from Fauré's Dolly Suite.
Out of Silence, which is my third book about performing, is a collection of short chapters about things connected with performing which I found myself mulling over and to some extent wanting to explain to people, so that when people come to concerts they have more insight into what goes on in the performer's mind and what goes into the making of a performance.
When I picked up Out of Silence, it was absolutely unputdownable for me, because Susan was speaking for all of us, for pianists, for musicians in general, and also there are so many things that I wish I could actually say in my writing, but I didn't quite know how to put them into words, and she did it for me.
I have found it very useful for myself to write about music, because that seems to help to create an outlet for the things that I feel about performing and about the musician's life, and I think it helps me to digest really what happens to me as a musician, to be able to articulate it in words.
Listening to another pianist in the audience is one thing, but playing together is another. And then a piano duet, you have to share one keyboard with another person, and physically you're so close, but if musically you think so differently, there's no way you can play together. And so in that respect, this is a very good opportunity for me, that now I know how Susan writes. By playing together I can actually get into her musical language sort of almost under the skin, and so that's really, really fascinating. I was really looking forward to this part today, and it's gone well, I think.
There must be quite a lot of cultural differences that make it hard to translate.
When we started to meet to talk about the challenges of translation, then I started to learn about the intricacies of Japanese and how it worked, and how Noriko was proposing to put my words into Japanese. And for example, she explained to me that in Japanese, women talk in a different manner than men. They actually have different endings on their words. I believe different word orders sometimes even different words that women and men use for the same thing. And so one of Noriko's first questions to me was, do you write in a woman's voice? Or do you think of yourself as writing more in a man's voice? Or where is your voice on the spectrum?
Noriko, what other differences are there that you've found already?
Well, when Susan starts playing with words, then that can be quite challenging for a translator, because, of course, Japanese has got a completely different vocabulary. So, for example, the word play, Susan used this word as playing the piano and then also as children playing. But in Japanese, these are completely two different words, and I cannot put them together. And also we talk about, for example, practicing, but there are many, many ways of practicing. practicing leisurely to improve our long-term technique, practicing because the concert is coming tomorrow, but I am not ready kind of practice, which is all in this book. And, you know, it's got to be done by another musician because I can really see it in context. Oh, yes, this is a leisure practice. No, this is not leisure practice. Another thing that suddenly I've just remembered, one of the first questions I asked Susan was, there's one chapter that, I've just gone back to the piano after how many weeks of holiday, and then my fingers feel like sausages. And we say it all the time in English, but in Japan we don't. We have different words for it. So that's one of the sentences that gave me this idea. I really want to translate this book, because if a professional translator came in and said, oh, my fingers do feel like sausages into Japanese, that would sound really strange. But I had to ask Susan, what kind of sausages did you mean?
I think I said, well, perhaps chipolatas. But I think in the end, did you stick with the sausage metaphor, or did you find another thing to put in that image?
I will have to mention sausage, of course. That's a very charming part of this book.
Well, Susan's going to sit at the piano now and give us a quintessentially British, I think.
Well, I knew that Noriko had chosen a Japanese piece, and so I thought I would choose something absolutely English. And I'm always happy to have a chance to play the piano music of Billy Mayerl, who was the pianist at the Savoy Hotel in London in the 1920s and 30s, when he became enormously famous in his own lifetime. This is called The Harp of the Winds. Difficult to play, but has to sound very stylish and effortless. Another very interesting discussion we had a few months ago was about how to translate into Japanese the doubts and insecurities that I occasionally express in the book, in the sense of asking myself, am I really well enough prepared? Can I really step out there and face this audience, you know, with my nerves intact and so on? And Noriko has explained to me that in Japan, this might sound a bigger deal than it sounds in English, because in English it's considered quite normal and acceptable, I think, to express that kind of questioning of yourself. But I've understood now that in Japan it's not exactly like that, that it would be considered more daring and possibly more unwise to admit to those kind of feelings in a performer.
Of course, in Japan, people are full of self-doubt, and we do worry quite a lot, and we can get nervous before performing. But how much we admit it in writing, that's another matter.
And there's something about, I hope I'm right when I say this, there's something about the reserve that is characteristic of both Japanese people and British people. To some extent, I feel that I understand, you know, what that reserve is all about. And I feel that Noriko understands what my reserve is all about.
I think so, yes. Slightly different style again, but we are not always advertising our mood to other people in Japan. So that happens in British culture very much too. I have noticed that.
Noriko, this, of course, is a devastating time for everybody in Japan. Let's talk about your concert, because you found a practical way of using your music to help, haven't you?
Yes, I was in Japan. The earthquake came and people are absolutely devastated about it. And I didn't really come out of Japan. I just wanted to stay there and fight. But a very good friend of mine said, why don't you play a concert for Japanese people in London? And that really gave me a reason to jump on a plane this time, because in Japan, all the concerts are cancelled because in Tokyo area we have power cuts. Because of Fukushima nuclear power plant, which providing a lot of electricity to Tokyo metropolitan area, we don't have enough electricity. So inevitably, therefore, concerts are gone. So I came all the way back to London to play a recital for the people who are suffering very much and trying to raise money. It's been very therapeutic for me as well. It just took my mind off in a way that I can actually focus, and then that's going to be for the people who lost absolutely everything. I'm just suddenly feeling very moved and touched by the whole thing, because when you mentioned different culture, yes, I come from a completely different culture, completely different background, different location, different language, and then actually piano somehow, although that we are actually very alone instrument, piano brought Susan and myself together, and we have so much in common, and we can actually appreciate and respect our differences. And I think, the music has done it, even though we are actually communicating through this book, and then I'm trying to put it out in my language. But what put us together is really music.
Noriko OGAWA playing Rain Tree Sketch 2 by the Japanese composer Toru Takemitsu, just one of the pieces that you can hear at the Japan Appeal concert she's giving tomorrow at King's Place in King's Cross in London. And if you'd like more details, you can get them via the Woman's Hour website.